Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today's topic is the Harrier. In the 1960s, multiple countries were attempting to develop a VTOL-capable aircraft, which means vertical takeoff and landing. These countries included the United States, Soviet Union, France, West Germany, and the United Kingdom. The latter of those countries is regarded to be the most successful, with the UK's Hawker Aircraft Company deciding to create the Harrier. The Harrier originated from a test aircraft called the Flying Bedstead, which in short is an engine, seat, control stick, and some wheels slapped together to create an early thrust-vectoring engine for Rolls-Royce. Shortly after the days of the Flying Bedstead, the Hawker Aircraft Company, and at that time the Bristol Aeroplane Company, drew up plans for a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that could meet NATO's requirements for a light attack aircraft. Originally designated the FGA.1 Kestrel, the new attack aircraft took its first evaluation flight for the Royal Air Force, U.S. Air Force, and West German Air Force, also known as the Luftwaffe. The interesting thing about the 9 Kestrels built, instead of using the intended production version of Bristol's Pegasus 5 engines, which were capable of producing 18,000 pounds of thrust, and instead using a less developed version which produced 15,000 pounds of thrust. From its first flight to the end of its evaluation period in late 1965, the aircraft made over 960 sorties, also known as flights for people who aren't familiar with military aviation, with only one aircraft being lost. By 1967, after more testing by both the RAF and Royal Navy, 60 of what became the Harrier GR1s would be ordered by the RAF. By 1969, the Harriers had been delivered to No. 1 Squadron at RAF Wittering, which became the first squadron to convert to the new aircraft. As this era in history was the height of the Cold War, RAF Germany was also given some Harriers to be stationed in West Germany to be used as close air support aircraft to launch attacks in case of a Soviet invasion of West Germany from the east. At the same time, the United States was seriously considering purchasing the Harrier for the United States Marine Corps. They eventually decided to purchase the Harrier, and the first one was delivered in 1971, and entered service with the USMC in the same year. The most interesting difference between the US and UK development technology is the factor of the Soviet Union. During the development of the Harrier and its prototypes, the Soviet Union was working on the Yak-36 VTOL aircraft for its own navy. But instead of taking the US route of trying to get their aircraft off the ground first, the UK slowly developed the best aircraft they could to beat the Soviets. If you look at the differences between the capabilities of the Harrier compared to the Yak-36, it's immeasurable, mainly because the Harrier actually worked and entered service compared to the Yak-36 only being able to hover and flew after the Harrier. The Harrier continued in service with the RAF and USMC. The Royal Navy was eyeing a new aircraft to be used as an interceptor, which at the time the not-so-great de Havilland Sea Vixen held as its primary role, as the Harrier had already shown its use at sea when the prototype P-1127 landed on HMS Ark Royal in 1963. Later, in 1975, the Royal Navy ordered 24 specially built Sea Harriers for its upcoming Invincible-class aircraft carriers. During 1978, the original 24 airframe order was increased to 34. 4 years later, the Harrier would see its first proper war in 1982 when the country of Argentina invaded the southern Atlantic British overseas territories of the Falkland Islands and the island of South Georgia. The UK sent over 127 ships, and importantly to this story, 42 Harriers, comprising of the Sea Harriers of the 801st Naval Air Squadron and 14 upgraded Harrier GR3s, which prior to the task force's departure had been retrofitted to be capable of serving on the carrier HMS Hermes and HMS Invincible. The GR3s took on the ground attack roles, while the Sea Harriers took down over 20 Argentine aircraft during the conflict, while only losing 4 aircraft and 2 pilots. In the same year of 1982, the UK and USA signed an agreement to create the second generation of the Harrier in a joint development program. By that time, the Americans were already working on their own version of the Harrier II, the AV-8B Harrier II, since 1977. The American variant first took flight in 1981, and the British variant took flight in 1985 and was called the Harrier GR5. Now that we've reached what ended up becoming of the final variants of the Harrier, it's time we go over the specs. Every Harrier was equipped with a Rolls-Royce Pegasus engine, which was capable of producing 21,750 pounds of thrust, and could push the aircraft to a maximum speed of 775 knots, or 1,065 kilometers an hour. The Harrier had two 25mm cannons, which could be equipped with AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles, 1,000-pound paveway guided bombs, and LAU 5003 rocket pods, and up to 2 drop tanks. The Harrier's next assignment was during a NATO mission in Kosovo in 1999, in which it assisted the bombing of Serbian military targets and ended up having one of the highest accuracy ratings of over 80% of munitions hitting their target. The Harrier's final operations with the UK was during the War on Terror in both Afghanistan and the coalition invasion of Iraq, where it continued its precision strike missions. The Harrier was first retired from the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy in 2006, and then it was fully retired from the RAF in 2010, even though it was supposed to retire in 2018. After its retirement from the RAF and Royal Navy, 72 Harriers were sold to the U.S. to be used as spare parts for the AV-8B in the USMC. The Americans have continued to fly the Harrier all the way up until 2026, where just like the Royal Navy, it will be placed by the F-35B. The Harrier is one of the most recognizable and best performing military aircraft in the world, therefore cementing its legacy in history. Thanks for watching this video, and I'm sorry for the delay of 5 months. I hope to resume regular uploads, but it's a bit complicated because finding topics is really hard. But thank you, and please like and subscribe.